People, unknowingly, believed that the wives of the fallen angels were mere innocent victims, but what lies beneath the surface is something far more sinister. In those ancient times, in a world that was just beginning to understand the vastness of creation, many believed that the history of our ancestors was simple, pure, and without deep mysteries. However, the truth hidden in the shadows of history is darker than anyone could imagine. They were, in fact, part of the greatest rebellion the heavens and earth had ever witnessed. And when the archangel Michael descended, bringing with him celestial justice, there was no mercy for the rebels. What he did to these women will be something that shocks even the hardest of hearts. A long time ago, before the great destruction that devastated the earth, something happened that tore the fabric of the world as we know it. The angels, beings of pure light and divine mission, were called to watch over the children of men. They were called the Watchers. Sent by God's command, they had the duty to observe, guide, and protect humanity. But the Watchers, as it turned out, were not content with merely watching. When humanity began to grow and human generations multiplied, something in their hearts was corrupted. Among the creatures walking on the earth, the Watchers saw something they should not desire: women. And not just any women. These women were daughters of the descendants of Cain, the one who had murdered his own brother Abel and whose lineage had strayed from the paths of the Lord. His descendants, marked by violence and rebellion, were now living, as it was written, beneath the mountain. There, they had surrendered to complete corruption, abandoning purity and following the paths of carnal pleasure, the pursuit of immeasurable wealth and absolute power. They were no longer a people who respected God's creation. They only sought to satisfy the desires of the flesh, with no fear of the Creator. Ancient texts, such as the Book of Adam and Eve and the Jubilees, reveal the secrets of those generations. Cain, the firstborn of sin, originated a lineage that not only distanced itself from God, but also gave itself over to all forms of corruption. Unlike the children of Seth, who remained on the mountains in holiness and reverence, the children of Cain were determined to follow a path of decadence and ruin. And it was these women, descendants of the corrupted children of Cain, who attracted the eyes of the Watchers. These women were not mere mortals without their own will. They were not naive or innocent. On the contrary, they were thirsty for something more, something beyond the common life they led. They desired power. They longed for more than just earthly love. They wanted forbidden knowledge, secrets that were beyond human comprehension, the arts that the angels possessed. What the Watchers had to offer was not ordinary love, but celestial power, knowledge so deep that it would transcend human limits and the very nature of life itself. When the Watchers approached, what followed was not a tragedy imposed by celestial forces. It was not a story of coercion or violence. No, it was a mutual rebellion. The Watchers and these women desired the same thing: to transgress the limits imposed by God. They did not hesitate. They embraced the fallen angels and became their wives. And together, in this dark pact of pure insubordination, they brought to earth the Nephilim, hybrid creatures, giants of immense strength who brought with them not only power, but also destruction and decay. The Nephilim, these unnatural children of the Watchers and the daughters of Cain, walked upon the earth as giants. They ruled with iron hands, dominating the peoples and spreading chaos wherever they went. Their hearts were as impure as their fathers, and their actions knew no bounds. Wherever they went, nothing remained but destruction and suffering. And so, the world, already marked by sin, was further shattered. For the blood of the Nephilim was not the blood of humanity, but of a greater, deeper corruption. What was happening was not merely any sin. It was a cosmic crime, a direct affront to the divine plan, and the heavens watched everything with unwavering eyes of justice. The moment the transgression was completed, the mercy of the Lord was exhausted. The heavenly court rose, and judgment was inevitable. Not only would the Watchers, the fallen angels, be punished, but also their wives, those women who had consciously participated in the greatest rebellion ever recorded in the heavens. These women were not mere spectators of the fall of the angels. They were not innocent victims, as some might believe. They were co-authors of the greatest transgression against God and creation. They joined with celestial beings, but not for redemption, and instead for destruction, embracing forbidden knowledge, the power of beings who did not belong to the earth. They too had strayed from God, following a dark path of corruption and despair. And thus enters Michael, the great archangel, warrior of the heavens, with a dark and terrifying mission. It was not only to imprison the Watchers, but to deal with the women who had given birth to the Nephilim in a way that history, with all its attempts to soften the truth, would never dare to tell. What Michael would do next would not be merciful or kind. His actions would be devastating. The world, already teetering on the edge of chaos, would never be the same again. Before we can comprehend Michael's wrath, we must first understand the magnitude of the threat posed by the children of these women, the Nephilim. These beings were not mere giants. They were monsters, creatures of pure abomination. The moment those women accepted the Watchers in a pact of desire and corruption, it triggered a chain reaction that could not be contained. At first, to them, everything seemed like a blessing, a dream come true. Power, knowledge, and union with beings from another realm were deep and ambitious desires, and they accepted them with pleasure. These women were not helpless victims of a cruel fate. They seduced the angels, accepted the pact, and became part of a rebellion against God. Ancient texts, such as the Book of Adam and Eve, and more arcane Jewish traditions, reveal that these women were already corrupted. They were part of the lineage of Cain, whose descendants had long strayed from God. They did not pray for holiness. They did not cry out for forgiveness. On the contrary, they wanted the power the Watchers offered, longed for the transformation that union with the angels provided. And upon conceiving the Nephilim, an indescribable evil spread across the earth. The Book of Enoch, which tells the story of the Watchers, describes in horrifying detail the birth of the Nephilim. When these women gave birth, they did not bring forth ordinary children, but gigantic beings, monsters of unimaginable strength. What men had, the Nephilim consumed without mercy. And when humanity had nothing left to offer, these giants turned against men themselves, devouring them, destroying them, dragging them into an endless abyss. But the destruction did not stop there. The Nephilim, in their monstrosity, taught men secrets that should never have been revealed: sorcery, enchantments, weapons crafting, and war strategies. The heavens had concealed these knowledge to protect humanity, but the Nephilim twisted and corrupted them, using them to spread terror. Human blood spilled, innocence was destroyed, God's creation was profaned, and the most disturbing of all, the women, the mothers of these hybrids, did not repent. They did not lament what they had done. On the contrary, they reveled in the power they now possessed. They were the mothers of giants, the queens of an empire of destruction. They were the lineage of kings and gods among men. Their children ruled with brutality, and they stood by their sides, proud of their corruption, exalting the terror their sons imposed upon humanity. But the heavens were watching. Michael was watching. The archangel, commander of the heavenly armies, saw everything. He saw what the Nephilim had done, saw the suffering they had caused, saw the growing pride of the women, the mothers of the monsters. And he waited. He waited as these hybrids taught the black arts, as the giants crushed humanity beneath their feet, as the mothers became more perverse, more defiant. God, in his infinite mercy, gave time, a precious time. Time for them to repent, time for them to turn away from the evil they had helped unleash, time for them to reject the power they had so freely accepted. But they did not. They did not reject corruption. On the contrary, they embraced it more tightly. And then, the Lord's patience ran out. The measure of iniquity was full, and Michael received his command. Go. Bind the Watchers, judge the women, cleanse the earth. Mercy was gone. What followed would no longer be compassion or forgiveness. It would be divine wrath. And with Michael's wrath, the earth would know a destruction it could never have imagined. The women who once received angelic lovers, touching the heavens with their bodies, would soon face divine fire. Those arms that held them in ecstasy would now be the cause of their irreversible fall. The mothers who, in their union with the Watchers, gave birth to giants, would now witness the birth of something much more terrifying: destruction, the final judgment that would come to cleanse the world of the evil they had brought into it. It was no longer just an act of rebellion. It was a profound and irreparable corruption. It was a corruption that transcended the limits of the flesh, invading the spirit and the cosmos. The nature of God, creation itself, was being profaned. And Michael, the fiercest and most fearless archangel of the heavenly armies, was about to ensure that every trace of this transgression was eradicated from the face of the earth. The judgment began. The wives of the Watchers, who had once been worshipped and exalted, now found themselves before divine wrath. They, who had once been revered as the mothers of giants, venerated by angelic and mortal beings alike, now saw the heavens open against them and destruction descending upon their heads. The Book of Enoch recounts what followed. God sent his holy ones, the most fearsome and powerful angels, and leading them was Michael, not as a messenger of mercy, not as a bearer of peace, but as the executor of celestial justice. "Go and proclaim to them," God said, "that they will witness the destruction of their beloved. Bind them for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth." The judgment, as promised, first fell upon the Watchers, the angels who had rebelled and descended to earth to corrupt creation. They were bound, immobilized by invisible chains, and cast beneath deep mountains and desolate deserts, where their light and glory would forever fade. But the wives, the women who had given their bodies and souls to rebellion, were not forgotten. According to ancient traditions and the Book of Enoch, Michael did not imprison them as he did the Watchers. Their punishment was even more terrible, more humiliating. Michael ripped from them what they cherished most, the beauty they used to seduce the angels. That grace, that celestial light which made them so desired, was taken from them, leaving only ugliness and deformity. Their faces, once radiant, now became pale and twisted. Their names, which had once been revered and feared by the giants, became cursed, and those who once honored them now repudiated them. The books of the giants and other mystical Jewish texts reveal something even darker. Some of these women, after the judgment, did not find rest. They became cursed spirits, wandering the earth, tortured by their own conscience and deformed by God's wrath. Others, however, were simply erased from memory and existence, as if they had never existed, as if creation itself had forgotten them forever. But why such severity? Why such an extreme punishment? Because Michael knew what many still fail to comprehend. They were not innocent. They were not passive victims of fate. They had been co-creators of the rebellion, of the corruption that nearly destroyed the earth. They had chosen the divine beings, the fallen angels, instead of choosing the ways of the Lord. They had surrendered to evil consciously. And when heaven gave them time to repent, they not only refused, but deepened their betrayal even further. Heaven's patience had run out. The corruption had already contaminated creation too deeply. The women who once touched the heavens, who had the most powerful lovers the world has ever known, chose rebellion. And Michael, he who always stands before the throne of God, ensured that the price of betrayal would be paid in a definitive and irrevocable manner. Heaven did not forget. The earth would not forget. And God's justice, executed by Michael's tireless hand, would remain forever etched in the stones of history as a warning to all who dared challenge the divine order. Now the story takes a truly terrifying turn, something that defies even human comprehension. When we imagine the punishment for such grand rebellion, we typically think of death, an immediate and final end. But for the wives of the Watchers, death was not enough. The punishment reserved for them was far deeper and crueler, something that stretched beyond physical death and into the realms of eternity. In 1 Enoch 19:2, we are confronted with a disturbing revelation. "And the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens, Sirens. But wait, sirens are not angels. They are not human. They are monsters, cursed hybrids, often depicted in ancient mythologies as creatures half woman, half beast, with a dark power of seduction. But what the curse upon these women represented was not only the physical transformation into monstrous beings, but an eternal condemnation, a punishment that extended throughout creation. In Greek mythology, sirens were famous for their ability to lure sailors to their deaths with their hypnotic songs. They were the embodiment of fatal temptation, the song that led to destruction. But within some Jewish traditions, sirens take on an even darker role. They were seen as unclean spirits, corrupted beings who inhabited the seas and desolate places, creatures with an evil power of seduction and destruction. And this is no mere coincidence. In biblical thought, especially during the Second Temple period, the sea symbolized chaos, divine judgment, and separation from the presence of God. The sea was a place of darkness and destruction, a realm where man should not venture without facing consequences. And when these women were transformed into sirens, it was not just a change in physical form. They were cast out of the divine presence, condemned to wander in the darkness of chaos as shadows of what they had once been. These women, who once surrendered to the fallen angels and tasted forbidden pleasures, were now cast into monstrous forms, rejected by both heaven and earth. They no longer belonged to the human or celestial realm. This was not mercy. It was a living curse, a transformation that made them the very embodiment of corruption. Now their mission, which was once disguised as desire, temptation, and seduction, became eternal. They had been the secret seductresses, those who silently corrupted humanity, and now they were condemned to continue their role as temptresses, but in a distorted and cruel way. They became monstrous beings, with the sole purpose of luring men to destruction. What they had once done in the shadows would now be their eternal fate, leading humanity to corruption, sin, and downfall. But their curse did not stop there. You might ask, was being transformed into sirens the only punishment? The answer, with the weight of 1,000 storms, is no. Ancient scriptures and apocryphal sources suggest deep layers of judgment upon these women. The Apocalypse of Peter, an early Christian apocryphal text, describes a terrifying vision of hell, where women who seduced men to sin are hung by their hair over a boiling sea. They, who once attracted others to corruption, are now bound, exposed to eternal torment and shame. These images are not mere fantasies. Many ancient interpreters, both Jewish and Christian, believed that these descriptions did not refer only to the souls of common sinners, but also to the wives of the Watchers. These women, who were the co-creators of the celestial rebellion, were now subjected to eternal torment, their souls in constant suffering, their actions corrupting them further each moment. And according to the Book of Jubilees, 10:3-7, after the flood, Noah, the righteous man, implored God for humanity, fearing that the evil spirits, descendants of the Nephilim and the wives of the Watchers, would continue to corrupt his descendants. God, in his justice, allowed only a portion of these spirits to remain to test humanity, but sealed the rest, binding them beneath the earth in deep chains. While the passage mainly refers to the spirits of the Nephilim, many ancient masters believe that the wives of the Watchers shared this fate. They were imprisoned, sealed in the depths, not annihilated, for annihilation, in his mercy, would have been a relief. Their punishment was an eternal existence in disgrace. They would not vanish, but live in living shame, tormented by their own corruption and separation from divine favor. Once honored among women, they were now hated. Once united to fallen angels, they were now divorced from both heaven and earth. Once mothers of powerful warriors, they were now mothers of monsters whose existences would be cursed forever. These women, once exalted, now became the very incarnation of the curse, with their souls twisted and lost forever. And ultimately, their greatest punishment was silence. The post-flood sacred texts are utterly silent about them. Their names vanished. There were no more genealogies, no more stories. They were erased from the collective memory, excluded from the book of life. For biblical thought, this was the greatest form of divine rejection possible, to be erased, completely forgotten. Yes, the sirens were undoubtedly part of their curse. They became living symbols of corruption, abandonment, and divine judgment, condemned to wander endlessly in the depths of the sea, seeking souls to seduce, but never finding relief. And the story they began, of power and seduction, ended with silence and forgetfulness, a punishment that would never cease. The punishment of the wives of the Watchers was not merely physical destruction or death, but something far deeper, something that strikes at the darkest layers of human and spiritual existence. Their true punishment was not simply an end, but an eternal exile, a disgrace that consumed them forever. They would not be annihilated, for annihilation would, in some sense, be mercy. What happened to them was eternal torment, a divine banishment in its purest form. But why such severity? Why was Michael's punishment and the celestial justice so relentless? The reason lay not in personal vengeance, but in something deeper, the preservation of God's creation itself. The balance that had been broken by the rebellion was not just an offense to heaven, it was a corruption of the very fabric of creation. The wives of the Watchers did not merely sin, they voluntarily broke the natural order, defying the divine will by uniting with fallen angels. They seduced the divine, became accomplices to the corruption that invaded the earth, and gave birth to a race of monsters, the Nephilim, whose legacy of violence, sorcery, and war spread like a cancer. They became the fertile ground for all that God detests: violence, arrogance, mockery of divine order, and worst of all, the destruction of God's image in man. And this was not an evil that could be ignored. The corruption they helped create was something that, if left unchecked, would destroy all of creation. For Michael, the celestial prince, the one who stands at God's right hand, the great executor of divine decrees, mercy had already run out. Justice was no longer an option, it was a necessity, and the divine command was given. Destroy the descendants of the Watchers among men, and send them against each other, so that they destroy themselves in battle. Also bind the wives, so they no longer seduce humanity. This decree is implied in Enoch and expanded upon in Jewish oral traditions. Michael was not just the bearer of the heavenly sword, he led this terrible judgment. He oversaw the extermination of the Nephilim, the civil war among the giants, the plagues, and the famine that decimated those who had corrupted the earth. He also ensured the sealing of the evil spirits, so that they could no longer walk freely among men. But for the wives, the judgment was even more poetic, a sentence that deeply reflected the crimes they had committed. These women, who had seduced with beauty and temptation, became deformed beings. What they had used to attract the fallen angels was now the cause of their transformation into sirens. They were no longer beautiful, but monstrous. They were no longer desired, but rejected, cursed to attract, seduce, and deceive, but never to find satisfaction, honor, or power again. Their punishment was the curse of eternal contempt and constant torment. Miguel, as the executor of justice, ensured that each of their crimes was paid for justly, and with that, their story came to an end. There was no mercy, no redemption. There was only eternal silence. But you might ask, why does this matter now? This happened millennia ago. What does it have to do with us? The answer, although uncomfortable, is clear: everything. Jesus gave us a terrifying prophecy that, in many ways, seems to be ignored in today's world. He said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." But let's reflect a little more on those words. He wasn't just talking about wickedness or moral corruption. It wasn't just a warning against sin. Jesus was suggesting something much deeper, something dark and disturbing. In the days of Noah, the line between the divine and the human was broken. Evil spirits walked freely on the earth, and the world celebrated rebellion. Corruption wasn't just something moral or physical, but a true inversion of the divine order. And if we look around us today, we see that this line is once again blurring. Transhumanism, for example, seeks to merge man and machine. trying to reach immortality outside of God's plan. Artificial intelligence, with its synthetic consciousness, challenges the idea that life is a divine gift, not a human creation. Human-animal hybrids are being forged in laboratories, playing God, while nature and humanity are being distorted in ways that should never be. Once again, the line between the human and the divine is fading. Profane unions are celebrated, while everything that is divine and sacred is mocked and ridiculed. The rebellion that began in Eden, that took shape in the days of Noah, was not eradicated. It evolved, disguised itself, but continues to threaten creation. The Watchers may not have returned, but their spirit is back, once again seducing humanity to mix the profane with the sacred, to tear down the barriers that God has set between the realms. And the rebellious spirits? Those ancient demons, children of the Nephilim, never left. They continue to exist, whispering, tempting, warring against the righteous, the remnants of true humanity. And so, while the world celebrates freedom and innovation, the ancient mistakes repeat themselves, once again challenging the divine order and threatening the purity of creation. What happened in the days of Noah, the divine exile, and the corruption that took shape, might be closer than we think. The story of the Watchers and their wives did not end with the flood. It remains alive in every attempt to profane the divine and dismantle God's order. Here is the good news. Just as it happened before, Miguel will rise again. The Bible tells us there was war in heaven. Miguel and his angels fought against the dragon. Miguel is not only the executor of heaven, he is its protector. Just as he defeated the rebellion of the Watchers and their wives, just as he led the purification of the earth in the days of Noah, he will once again command the heavenly armies to defeat the final rebellion at the end of time. Therefore know, the wives of the fallen were not victims, they were accomplices in a cosmic betrayal, and when the judgment came, it was complete, body, soul, and legacy. That same spirit of rebellion is still present in our world today. But so is Miguel, so is the heavenly decree, and so is the promise that when evil reaches its peak, heaven will not remain silent. Just as in the days of Noah, so will it be again. But this time the final battle will not take place in the shadows. Miguel will rise, and every rebel, whether spirit or flesh, will face the final judgment. Did you know this story, which is in the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees? Leave your opinion in the comments. God bless.
Family,
See you soon.
I need you to open your eyes and recognize the time we are in. These are not ordinary days. The Bible tells us in 2 Timothy 3:1-5 that in the last days perilous times shall come. It describes men as lovers of themselves, lovers of money, proud, unthankful, disobedient, and unholy. Look around, we are watching that prophecy unfold in real time. Everywhere you turn, people celebrate sin and call evil good and good evil, just like Isaiah 5:20 warned. Our entertainment, our music, and our media have become stages for rebellion against God. The hearts of many have grown cold, and the love of many has waxed cold, exactly as Jesus said in Matthew 24:12. He told his disciples that before his return there would be wars and rumors of wars, nations rising against nations, earthquakes, famines, pestilences, and false prophets deceiving many. Look at the headlines: global conflict, plagues, deception everywhere. The digital world has even become a counterfeit reality, pulling people away from truth and into distraction. We are living right in the pages of prophecy. But understand this, the goal isn't fear, it's readiness. Jesus said in Luke 21:28, "When you see these things begin to come to pass, look up, for your redemption draws near." That means instead of panicking, the believer should be preparing. Instead of being distracted, we should be discerning. The spirit of the Antichrist is already at work through systems, governments, entertainment, and even within the church, where compromise has crept in, but the true remnant will stand firm. We are called to be light in the darkness, watchmen on the wall, warning others that time is short and Jesus is coming soon. So I'm asking you, examine your heart. If you've been lukewarm, repent. If you've been distracted, refocus. If you've drifted from His word, return. The Bible doesn't just say the last days are coming, it says we're living in them right now.